There we go. All right, there's my audio. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. Look, we've got everything kind of working. We got our camera working, so now you can see me. You can see how handsome I am. We have our tabletop simulator here working. We are looking at a portion of the famous Metz map for Kriegsspiel, a very well-known, much beloved Kriegsspiel map colored in by Bill Leeson, who is essentially the person who preserved and saved Kriegsspiel from the dustbin of history in its original form, translating the original rules, coloring in the maps, and so on. Let's see here. Let me check the YouTube. Today is going to be a special Q&A session, meaning that if you have any questions, you are absolutely welcome to pop in and ask the questions. You can put the question into the YouTube, which is probably the best place to put them. Otherwise, I'm going to talk to you a little bit just kind of in general about what Kriegsspiel is, and then I'm happy to answer your questions on top of that. Now, the reason for today's video is it's a special episode. Our normal episode is going to be Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. The reason I'm live right now is because I want to do a test of everything that we've got, because we've done a lot of work to kind of dial this in. Our first episode was a little bit of a disaster, but that's okay. That's part of what Kriegsspiel teaches us to cope with, right? When things don't go our way, right? Because no plan of battle survives first contact with the enemy, and therefore we're running another episode here. This is a special episode. Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. Why are we naming it that? Well, that's because most of the time, the show will run at 9 a.m. Pacific time on Sundays. That's coffee time for those of us on the west coast of the United States. But then that's also 5 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. So for our European friends, that is time for a beer, perhaps. So Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegspiel is the name of the podcast. All right, so let's talk about Kriegspiel. Kriegsspiel, just so if you don't know what it is, and frankly, if you're Googling Kriegsspiel, if you're looking up for a podcast about Kriegsspiel, you probably already have a good clue. But it is a double-blind wargaming system that was developed by the Prussian army. First invented back in 1812, then kind of set aside for a short period, then picked up again in 1826, then refined a little bit, then kind of set aside, then really picked up in the 1860s, and I believe 1867 is one of the years when a really big kind of revision of the rules came out. But there are actually multiple revisions of the rules in the 1860s, 70s, and so on. And eventually they said, you know what, the rules are spoiling the game. They're getting in the way, let's throw the rules out. And they came up with a system called Free Kriegsspiel. And Free Kriegsspiel is simply an umpire or a professor runs the game, and the students play it, and it's used as a training tool. It's used as an exercise. Despite the name Kriegsspiel, which makes people think that it's a game, it's not actually a game. Like I just said, it's a training exercise. So it's not meant to be fast. It's not necessarily intended to be fun. Originally, it was kind of planned out as a game. Then there was some value they figured as a training game and so on. And eventually, it became an exercise that wasn't about speed or fun or playability. And in fact, it's not even really about the combat. A lot of people think it's about the combat, and there are these intricate tables in Kriegsspiel that you can get from the original rule sets that take you through the combat, and here's how many casualties and so on. And there's even cool little dice. There's dice that were created for the game, and the only tough part for the umpire to decide is which of these dice do I roll, and you choose a die that is appropriate to a certain situation, us versus them. You roll the die, and right there on the face of the die, it has all the casualties for the different ranges and such. You apply the results, and then you go to the next 2-minute turn in Kriegsspiel. Now, the really cool thing about Kriegsspiel is that it's played double blind, meaning that there's actually three tables. There's a red table for the red team, a blue table for the blue team, and then, of course, the umpire table. And the umpire sees absolutely everything that's going on between the forces. So if I were to put, some blocks out here, and let's just grab from our red and blue setup a blue infantry unit and put them someplace out here. Here's an interesting position on top of this hill. And then we get a red force, and we also put them out here opposite the blue force. Okay, in this position, they would have line of sight with each other and they would see each other. In which case, on both tables, the umpire would place the following units. But let's say you have other units involved. Let's say you have some blue cavalry here. And, well, I only managed to get 3 blocks, but that's okay. And let's say they're doing cavalry things, horse things out here. They're on patrol. We'll even flip them over to their movement side because we have customized our blocks and we have them made so that they kind of work the way we want them to work. And let's take a red cavalry unit and put them down. Now, the red unit and the blue units all see each other here like this. So on the red table, I am going to put these blue units out right here, okay? Because red sees blue. But they don't see these guys over here. And because they don't see those guys over there, they do not get placed on the red table. Likewise, blue does see both red formations, and they get placed, obviously. Okay? What we do is we use Tabletop Simulator, and the really cool thing about Tabletop Simulator is it allows us to limit which each individual player can see because each individual player has their own map. So that's kind of the cool thing about it. That's kind of where we take it to the next level. So the fog of war is actually personalized. So if you're this unit here, you don't see this and you don't see this, meaning neither of these forces are placed on your map. So it's a pretty cool training exercise, and it teaches people the fog of war and so on. And it looks like I have a question, and Beatrice asks, how do you prepare a scenario for Kriegsspiel? And okay, that's an awesome question, and there's actually a whole lot to it, right? To learn how to run a Kriegsspiel is this whole thing where it's like learning how to drive a car. You got to kind of go through this whole process where you learn everything, except we don't have a training manual really for you. And the best way to learn is just kind of by doing. And we do have a system in the International Kriegsspiel Society to teach people all of these things. It's done over time. It's not something you're going to pick up overnight. I know there are people who want to pick up the rules, or they join the organization, they join the International Kriegsspiel Society, and they're like, teach me how to do a Kriegsspiel. And you're like, it's not that simple. It really does take a while to learn. And it's best done by doing, I feel. There is no one single standard rule book, and if you decide to play Kriegsspiel as it's written in the rules, you're going to learn very painfully that it isn't a very effective war game, because again, the Prussians who developed it were not playing it to have fun, they were playing it as a training exercise. That being said, yes, there are some guidelines for a Kriegsspiel. One of the first guidelines for Kriegsspiel is that the scenario should be winnable for both sides. Both sides should have some kind of an objective that they can reasonably achieve. Now, we've experimented with kind of going off the rails and doing no-win situations, what we would call a Kobayashi Maru style scenario. What I found from both playing in such a scenario and from running such a scenario, feedback from players, is it tends to frustrate people. Not everybody enjoys or appreciates those kinds of scenarios. So I think those sorts of scenarios have to be limited. Or you have to give the players sort of this thing where, well, if you can somehow hold out for so long, then you win, even though your force is ultimately destroyed if we were to play it out to the end. So that's one way. But anyway, both sides should have the ability to win a scenario. And we use the word scenario. I believe in the original Kriegsspiel rules, it goes by a different name. It's like a situation or whatever. And That's what the problem that's given to both players. It's the briefing and the problem. And so that's another thing, is not only is there a scenario where both players can win, both players are also given problems. And Kriegsspiel problems are really important because that's how they used it as a training exercise. I break it down into two kinds of problems. The first problem are the problems that are planned for by the Empire. For example, I might say that you have, to get to Fort St. Julian here, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. I apologize for my poor French. And all you have is this cavalry unit. So you are outnumbered, and the enemy holds the main approach to Fort St. Julian. Now that would be a Kriegsspiel problem, right? How do you solve that problem? And you have to think, am I going to split up my forces and go by different directions, take different routes? Am I going to create a distraction that could draw off this cavalry squadron so they go over here or something like that, to investigate, thus reducing my exposure to the enemy? Do I kind of try to sneak in? Do I take the long way around? What do I do to get there? That's a Kriegsspiel problem. But in addition to those problems, there are what I call organic problems that develop in every scenario, and that's just a problem that comes about through gameplay. For example, let's say, I end up here and I face the enemy in this open ground. However, the enemy also has a force that's coming up to flank me. And how do I solve that problem? That's a problem that's created by the players themselves, and that's an organic problem. It's a problem that just kind of arises naturally. We judge player performance based on how they solve these problems. It's not actually about who wins or loses the battle. It's not even about, if red does somehow manage to get in here with the unit. That doesn't necessarily mean that the red side wins. Like we would say the red side wins the battle, but the individual winner of the Kriegsspiel, and again, this is an individual accomplishment, is the person who solves the problems in the best way. Even if their force happens to be destroyed or routed or captured or whatever, the person who performs the best, and that means they network with one another, they solve their problems, they manage their forces effectively and competently, they are usually declared the winner. So a good scenario then is winnable by both sides. It is somewhat or somehow balanced. You have to create some kind of balance between the two, even if it's asymmetrical in terms of numbers and force composition. It has to be winnable by both sides. The next thing is there should be some kind of problems set for both sides. And then the other problem, or the other thing is you look at those organic problems, which are just going to come up naturally as the players maneuver and do things. But that's more or less how you prepare a scenario. You might write it out. You might deliver it verbally or whatever. That's kind of incidental. It just depends if you're throwing a game together pretty quickly or if you are running something a little more formal. If it's more formal, you'll probably provide both sides with a written briefing and give them a good long period to plot and plan their strategy for the battle, which is actually most of the fun. When people play Kriegsspiel, or especially newcomers, they come to the game, they're very interested in what I call smashing blocks together. They want to smash blocks. They want these guys to fight these guys really, really bad. And they want to make that happen, and they want to roll the dice, and they want to see what happens when these guys fight these guys. And they're very invested emotionally and psychologically in the outcome of this engagement. And for them, this is what it's about. This is what Kriegsspiel is all about. That's the big thing for them. The reality is, however, that's not what Kriegsspiel is about. Kriegsspiel is much more about how do you solve your problems? How do you maneuver to your objective? How do you, where do you decide to commit your troops? Where do you put your reserve, assuming you've kept a reserve? Where does the reserve go? And then when do you leave the battle? What's your exit strategy? Win, lose, or draw, what's your exit strategy? How do you survive the day? And these are very important things that are practiced in Kriegsspiel, because the reality is if you are a battlefield commander, especially if you're commanding at higher levels, you're not going to be able to micromanage things. You can't say, well, I want a platoon over here, and I want a company over there, and I want a regiment up here, and so on. No, no, no. You actually have commanders in the field who would be doing that for you. Now, if you're playing original Kriegsspiel, where you're actually wearing the hat of a captain or a lieutenant, who is commanding a couple half battalions or something, then yes, that's a little bit more relevant. But we generally play at a higher level of command because frankly it's a lot more fun, it's a lot less minutia, and it's a lot easier to run and play the games. And the people who play it will tell you they don't know any difference in terms of fun. They actually enjoy playing at the level at which we play, which is typically brigade, division, or even corps level. And sometimes we'll have human players at each of those levels, and even up to army level. And it's a lot of good fun. But the emphasis of Kriegsspiel is making those big decisions. And then we kind of let it play out. You know, how do you get to the objective? And what do you do when you get there? And again, like I said, where do you put your reserve? And what's your plan to get out and so on? And that's what's really important in Kriegsspiel. That's why when we get to the point where we smash the blocks together, that's actually kind of the late scenario stage. And I know for a lot of people they think, but wait a minute, that's when it's just getting good. That's just when it's getting started. And the fact is, actually, it's just the meat grinder, because units would go in, they would engage each other. The engagements don't actually go on for hours and hours and hours. The march to get into combat would go perhaps for hours. But the actual combat itself is usually, it lasts maybe 1, 2, or 3 or 4 turns tops, and then the units disengage and go their different ways. And then that's kind of the end. And what we do, because we don't want players to be hyper emotionally invested in the outcome of a battle, we don't usually play to the bitter end. So let's say one side is being, routed from the battlefield, or their flanks being rolled up. We don't actually play that out, because I think then it can almost get painful for the people on the losing side, humiliating even. And we don't want that. We don't want players so invested in that outcome that it becomes toxic or negative in some way. Usually it's enough to say, okay, it's very obvious that the blue side here is going to win the battle. Oop, I wanted to pick the pieces up, not draw a line. The blue side here has, outflanked the red, and it's very clear that the blue forces are going to defeat the red, and now red is going to have to retreat, okay? And so we would do that, and that would be the end of the battle. And then after the battle is over, we'll give all the players a critique. Real quick here, Shadowcat 6 lives, or 6 lives. Shadowcat, hello. I want to say hi. You're from Michigan. I am from California. You are watching the Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel podcast, and I want to say welcome. And if you have not yet discovered or joined the International Kriegsspiel Society, I'd like to invite you to join. We are at Kriegsspiel.org, and we have the link to our Discord on the front page. Absolutely come join and get in some games. We run games every Saturday, and everybody is welcome to join, learn how to play Kriegsspiel, and have some fun. I forgot what I was going to say. That happens, doesn't it? But anyway, hello. And I was going to say this. If you have a question about Kriegsspiel, go ahead and put it into the YouTube comments, and I will be very excited to answer your question for you. So, like I was saying, is at the end of every battle, we give everyone a critique. And we usually give each player some kind of an individual critique, or we will do kind of a round robin and we let everybody speak. And we kind of go in some sort of order, through the hierarchy. It's starting with the master or lead umpire who runs the game, and then going down through the umpires so that all the umpires get to say what they want to say from their perspective. And then we let the players speak, again following their chain of command. So the senior commanders would speak, The subordinates would then speak and so on. And at the end of that, everybody kind of has some lessons to take away from the experience. It's a learning. And my headset, I wonder if I'm losing juice in the headset. The headset just cut out. I had to turn it back on. I apologize. But let me plug it in real quick. And hopefully it doesn't cut out anymore. I hope I'm still good on the audio. Let me check the OBS. And it looks like I'm still good. All right. So like I was saying, is everybody gets to kind of comment. There's this whole critique thing that happens, and then we go on. And the umpires often learn as much, if not more, than the players do. In fact, umpiring Kriegsspiel is a heck of a lot of fun. It's one of the most underrated activities in the entire game, precisely because as an umpire, you get to see some really cool, insightful stuff. You get to see the players freaking out and going nuts, and you see players who are winning who are beside themselves because, it's a very mental exercise. And perhaps the most interesting insight that I've discovered in Kriegspiel is that how mental it is. That if you have a player who has every advantage and is winning the battle, but if mentally they believe they're being defeated or that they're losing, they will almost always end up losing the event because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. On the other hand, you can have a person who's like, yeah, we're doing great. And I think attitude is kind of everything. Now, there's a difference between having a positive, healthy attitude and being just so darn sure of yourself that you're almost what we would say is cocky. And if you go in with a cocky mindset, you are likely to make mistakes and you're likely to get served, if you will, to use a little cliche there. Um, and that also happens. And in fact, that's one of my weaknesses. I love the smack talk that happens sometimes in these games, or usually in the prelude running up to it. Not really during the game, because during the game, your communications are quite limited. You can send dispatches to your fellow commanders, but you generally don't send any kind of communication or dispatch to your opponents. Nonetheless, it's all part of the fun. It's a very good community. I want to say hello to Brett. Hey, Brett, I see that you are watching and listening. And Brett, just so people know, Brett is one of the people who helped me establish the forerunner to the International Kriegsspiel Society, which is the Southern California Kriegsspiel Society. In fact, Brett is the one who introduced me to my very first physical Kriegsspiel game. And boy, what an experience that was. And that's part of the reason why we have this whole system, this whole program to train people who are interested in the game. Because I learned how to do Kriegsspiel through a lot of very painful trial and error and experimentation, running games in person. And actually, we only came into the virtual realm because of the plague upon the land. And that's actually been a really cool thing because now we're able to run games in real time using this excellent system, Tabletop Simulator. And we play with people from all around the world, and we run games all the time. In fact, tomorrow evening, about the same time, I might be running a game if we get enough interest in the group. So it's really neat, what's happened, and to look back and to see that growth, and to see that first game I played with Brett, to think about that, where we literally got through maybe 2 hours of game time over the course of an entire day. I was lucky that day, of course. There was a football game on that I remember. I was able to watch the football game. But otherwise, it was a tough day. But we learned, we stuck with it, and well, here we are. Here we are. So, anyway, I'm getting close to my 30-minute time period. I don't see any more questions, but if you have a question, you've got another minute or two to drop it into the chat, and I will try to answer it. That being said, I'll run a little commercial here, which is our Patreon. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Patreon, either way. You are welcome. We have a couple of subscribers, and we just got here. This looks like a back-end page. I know that there's a front-end page, but either way, it's patreon.com/Kriegsspiel, and you are absolutely welcome to come and support us. Your support does feed directly into the International Kriegsspiel Society, and it helps us out. So it's much appreciated. And again, we're just now getting started. We started just yesterday, actually, Sunday morning, and we already have 2 subscribers. And I want to say thank you to those subscribers. I want to say thank you to Eli, who just subscribed today. And I really appreciate you coming on board, Eli. Let's see here. And Brett says, you had the dream of using the internet to do this years ago. It's only recently everything has come together to play with people across the world with a double-blind game system. And that's right. And we've actually changed this system up. Originally, we had 3 tables running, and then we kind of figured out there's a way that we can run this using Discord, and each individual player has their own table, and therefore their own map and their own experience of the fog of war. So that's super cool. And I think it makes for an unrivaled gaming experience. There is no hex encounter or physical or in-person war game that you can play that I think rivals what we do here in the International Kriegsspiel Society. So I'm pretty stoked about that. Pretty stoked. All right, let's see here. Let me see. I just want to make sure. All right. So one more time, I want to thank Eli for becoming our 2nd subscriber. I also want to thank George, who was our 1st subscriber last Sunday. And I really greatly and tremendously appreciate your support for the International Kriegsspiel Society and for your support for this podcast. And I want to invite everybody to do likewise. Of course, you can do as you please. I know some folks are on a budget. Don't feel bad if you can't. No worries, but please do join the International Kriegsspiel Society. Go to our website. I'll show you our website, which is going to get an overhaul. It's a few months old or so, and it's had some work put into it. It's going to get an overhaul though. This here shouldn't be here. It should look nicer on the screen. It does not, unfortunately. But again, it's going to be overhauled in the next week or 2, hopefully. First week of October is when that work is scheduled, so I guess that's next week. And it should start looking pretty good. We even have a store. I'll click on the store here, and you can see that we have all kinds of really cool Kriegspiel stuff. And so on. So there you go. So hey, if you're into Kriegsspiel or you want to get into Kriegsspiel, this is the place to do it. I want to invite you all and welcome you to come join in any games that we run. We run games every Saturday at 8 a.m. Pacific time, and it would be great to have you. And look, George just indicated his interest in tomorrow evening's game. So, George, I'll try to run that game for you. And he just indicated that interest on Discord, so you're not going to see it in the YouTube comments. But yes, George, I have you. I hear you loud and clear. So, everybody, I want to thank you all for checking out this YouTube. I hope the audio and the video and the experience was okay. I'll be playing it back because, again, this is kind of a test run. And we should be going again next Sunday at 9 a.m., although I may have a personal commitment that I can't get out of. I may have to travel, so I'll see. If I can't be here, I'll see if I can get one of our other principal individuals online here to run the episode. If not, that's okay. I apologize. I'll try to make it up. And of course, we will generally be pretty consistent on most Sundays. So I'm very excited to do this podcast for you. I'm very excited to invite you all to the community. And I'm super excited to see you all in our upcoming games. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. And we will see you on our next adventure.